got a helper this morning. Good morning or afternoon, wherever you are. It's morning for me and it is cold outside. It's about 15 degrees and we just got our first snow of the year here in Colorado. So I thought it would be a great day to sit in front of the cozy fire and talk to you about my cozy quilt and actually quilts in general, because I had a viewer request, actually a few viewer requests, to talk about the quilt setup, what the difference is between a quilt and a sleeping bag and all that kind of thing. So today we are going to do Quilt 101. That doesn't mean that you have to be a beginner backpacker to watch. It just means that if you're not familiar with quilts, if you haven't used one, if you have questions, this is a great place to start. If you're already a subscriber, welcome back. And if you're not, make sure you hit that subscribe button down below so you can get notified about new videos as they come up. So if you've been watching my channel for a while, you probably know that I am irrationally in love with this quilt. It's from Underground Quilts, and I've actually had it since I did my AT through hike back in 2018. It is now 2023, so this quilt has served me for over 5 years and literally thousands of miles. It still keeps me warm, and the only issues that I've had are a couple little places where I got holes, and I was able to fix those with tenacious tape, just a little patch, and then every now and then with most things that are made of down, a little feather will escape. But other than that, this quilt has been the bomb, and I'm gonna tell you why I love it so much, why I love quilts in general, and why they're worth considering for your through hike or even just a weekend backpacking trip. So what's the big difference between a sleeping bag and a quilt? If you've never used a quilt or never seen someone use one, you might kind of wonder, like, is that like something off your bed? You know, I know I did when I first started backpacking, and I heard people talking about quilts, and I was like, that sounds weird. And I want a sleeping bag that's going to wrap me up and keep me warm. But unfortunately, for me at least, I am not only a side sleeper, I'm what I would call an active sleeper. I toss and turn and roll around all night long. And so for me, a mummy bag, which is the lightest shape of a sleeping bag. Of course, you can get rectangular ones as well, but that's more material, more weight. So if you're trying to do lightweight or ultralight backpacking, then you don't probably want a rectangular bag. The mummy bags I felt were very uncomfortable, and it took me a while to actually learn how to use one properly, where the bag kind of rolls with you instead of trying to roll inside the bag and just make a big mess. So I decided to explore the option of quilts, and I was glad that I did. Now, if you're looking at a sleeping bag, one of the big features of it is that you've got the bag itself. I guess let me show you here. You know, it's wrapped around you, so you've got a top and a bottom, usually some kind of a hood and maybe a draft collar and a zipper. So you can basically encase yourself in fabric, and a lot of people like that because they feel like they don't have drafts, although in my experience I would get drafts through the zipper. And so what happens with that filling, especially the filling on the bottom underneath you, is when you lay on top of it, it compresses. And the way that down especially provides warmth is by trapping air in between the feathers and between the down. So if you don't have any loft, you don't have any warmth, and basically you're paying for twice as much fill as you actually really need. Okay, we'll be conservative and say a third as much, because with a quilt you do have extra material that wraps around you. So a sleeping bag is going to be less cost effective and more weight for the comfort level that you get based on the temperature rating. So that's one of the big downsides of a sleeping bag. Also, okay buddy, move along, move along, move along. With a sleeping bag, you end up paying for probably about a third more material and fill power than you actually need, because you're just laying on it and compressing it. So the other aspect of that is not only are you paying for that, you're also carrying it, because it's additional weight in your pack that is not really truly benefiting you. So it's fine to use a sleeping bag if you feel like that's what is best for you. But if you're curious about a quilt, well, let me show you some features and also explain how a quilt works so you understand what the differences are. So I'll stop here for just a minute and ask you to please take a moment and subscribe if you are not subscribed already. Also, make sure you hit that notifications button so you'll find out when I post new videos. This quilt, as I mentioned, is by Underground Quilts, and I'll just start at the top. And you can get various widths in your quilt. You can choose if you're doing a custom quilt, wide or a small one, depending on what you want. It opens up, we can see that, this wide, and it's got drawstrings with toggles so that you can tighten this up, which I often do when it's cold, and just sort of pull it up over my head. I did not opt to put a draft collar on it, but some custom quilts allow you to do that. And it's also got a couple of snaps, so literally you could snap it around your neck if you wanted to. Coming down the side, it's got little tabs that are used for the toggles, and I'll talk more about these in just a minute. And then down on the foot box, mine has snaps. Now there are different types of foot boxes. Some quilts you will find where this is actually sewn and you can't open it up flat. Some have a zipper, and others like mine have snaps. I like the snaps because I can easily decide how much I want it to be open or closed depending on the weather. Then down at the bottom, it also has a cord similar to the top with a drawstring in it. This one also has a couple of little hooks, so if you needed to, you could attach it to something and hang it up. One drawback of this design, even when it's fully drawn closed, it does have a little hole here. Now that can be drafty, and sometimes I'll put a sock or something in there just to kind of fill that hole if it's super cold or if the draft is bothering me. Now when I unsnap all the snaps and release the drawstring, I can open up the quilt to be entirely flat. So I can use it as a blanket by a campfire if I want, or in the summertime if it's warm and I don't want the quilt all wrapped around me, I can just lay it over me just like I would with my covers at home. Now, as I'm unfolding this, you might notice that the baffles here run lengthwise, and in the foot box, they run crosswise. Not all quilts are like this. Some have baffles that just go the full length. Some have box baffles to keep the down in place. And one advantage of this design was that I could order extra down in the foot box because I tend to get cold feet. And I did that. And then you could also, through Underground Quilts, add extra down here if you wanted to. Down options for quilts are typically anywhere from 800, 850 to 900 fill power. Obviously, the higher the fill power, the more compact and lightweight that quilt is going to be. This quilt weighs just under a pound, I believe. So it's very lightweight, much lighter than any sleeping bags that I found at the time that I was shopping. The toggles are used to keep your quilt. Let me snap it back up real quick. All right, so the toggles. Now, there are different toggle systems. Some companies use a little snap toggle. The ones from Underground Quilt at the time that I bought this quilt, I think they have since changed, were toggles like you might sometimes find on a jacket. And as I mentioned, they're attached to these cords. These are stretch cords, and they go through this little loop just like this. So you would just take it, thread it through, and then square it, and it's going to stay. The toggles are a little bit hard to use when your hands are cold. So that's probably one of my least favorite features of this quilt, but they do work very well. You can take these, and you've got the stretch cord, and you can thread your sleeping pad either in the middle of the toggles if you want, or what I've been doing is just sliding it through this way, and the toggles are on the bottom. I can actually even do this when I'm in bed, so I might at night, or say I get into camp early, I might not attach my quilt to the pad right away. I might want to just kind of sit around and snuggle it around me if I'm sitting up journaling and things like that. And then when I'm ready for bed, I can literally just reach under my pad, do one toggle on one side, slide the cord under, and then attach it on the other side. The benefit of this system is that, as you can see, the toggles pull the sides of the quilt together. If you have your pad here, you're basically tucking yourself in. They come down around the side of the pad. I'll show you this way. If the pad is right here, you've got quilt coming down just around the edges, and that blocks any drafts that you might have. So you're not paying for all that down and fabric and in terms of price and weight being underneath you and not using it. And it gives you a little bit more space because your pad is also kind of wrapped up inside the quilt. Some people actually tuck their pad down inside the foot box. Other people just lay this on top of the pad. I used to do it laying it on top, but when I was on the Colorado Trail, the system that I was using was the sleeping pad, the quilt, and then I also had a silk sleeping bag liner, which helps with drafts and also provides a couple of extra, I think 7 degrees of extra insulating power. Basically, it keeps you a little bit warmer. It's also nice to have that silk liner because if it is hot, then sometimes I can just either sleep in the liner or put my pad in the liner and use it like a bottom sheet and then throw the quilt over the top of me. But because I had that liner and I added some cords so that it would fit tightly onto my pad, it was easy then to just slide the pad right into the foot box, and then my foot box didn't move around. And it also kept it tighter around my feet, so my feet stayed a little bit warmer on cold nights. And I liked it because, like I said, I roll around a lot, and when this is just sitting on top of the pad, as I move around, it kind of slides around, and then it's more likely to bump against the side of the tent and get some moisture or condensation on it. So that system worked really, really well for me. It was pad, sleeping bag liner, and then quilt tucked in at the bottom, and that was a very warm and cozy sleep system. On really cold nights, you may find if you don't have a draft collar that you want to have a beanie, or I have Raynaud's syndrome, so I actually use mittens or gloves when I sleep just to keep me warm, you know. And I would do that even if I had a sleeping bag. But you might find that you want a beanie to help keep your head warm if you don't have, you know, if you don't have a draft collar or something on your quilt. So that's the one big thing, is like some people, if they want to tuck their pillow in to a hood, they might want a sleeping bag for that, although I find that I can just attach my pillow to my sleeping pad and it works out fine. So those are some options for you to kind of increase the warmth level if you want to use a quilt in the winter time. I mentioned I bought this quilt from Underground Quilts. It is a custom quilt, so I was able to pick the outside color, the inside color, different weight fabrics if you want, for maybe heavier on the outside and lighter on the inside. It's got DWR down, or hydrophobic down, inside it, so even if you do get some moisture, it will dry pretty quickly because it's not going to get absorbed. And those are pretty standard features from a lot of companies that make quilts. Other companies to look at would include Enlightened Equipment, which is very popular. 𝐒𝐫𝐤𝐵 makes a quilt. 𝐒𝐻N𝐬𝐫𝐲 makes a very interesting sleep system that I think is worth looking at, and maybe someday I'll review that. Gosh, there's so many of them. You can buy a custom quilt, and you're probably going to be looking at that $350 to $450 price range. If you've got less to spend, you can buy an off-the-shelf quilt, but you won't have the options of customization that you do with a custom quilt. And you can get them in different widths, you can get them in different lengths, different amounts of down inside it. You can choose basically what you want the comfort rating to be, the temperature rating. This one in particular was rated for 20, but by the time I put in the extra ounce of down in the foot and in the body, I think it's probably about a 17, and it has actually served me very well down to about 14 degrees or so at night. So it's been really good from that respect. But I would say do some research, look at reviews for different custom quilt companies, and then if you just can't afford that, you could look to get one used, or you could buy one from a company like Big Agnes or Thermarest, or even REI makes a quilt. Some of those are very lightweight quilts that you could use in the summertime, and that would be a great way to kind of test out a quilt system to see if it works for you, is just to get a less expensive one. Or you can actually make your own quilt. And I did that before I bought this one. I'll put the video up here that you can see using some Costco down throws. I don't believe they're available on Costco website right now, but they come and go seasonally. You might still want to look at that video just to how to, and then if you have some other down quilts, or maybe you can buy some inexpensive ones off of Amazon, I'll put a link down in the description for a couple that I found. And you could make your own quilt, which would probably get you down in that probably $100 price range. Or you could just buy an Amazon quilt. There's lots of options to buy quilts, and if you are having trouble with your sleeping bag, if you feel like it's not comfortable, if you feel like it's too heavy, then quilts are definitely worth exploring. But like I said, I love this. It has been a wonderful sleep system for me. The only time I could really imagine going back to a sleeping bag would be if I was doing something really cold, like Alaska in the wintertime, or the Arctic or something like that. I think for 3 seasons, this quilt at this temperature rating is perfect for me. So this has worked out really well for me, and I would encourage you to take a look at some quilt options if you're exploring what might be good for you, especially if you're planning an upcoming through hike. If you've got other ideas of topics that you would like me to cover, then feel free to drop those down in the comments. If you've gotten value from this video, please take a moment to hit that subscribe button down below. And if you're already a subscriber, thank you very much. I'd love it if you could share this video with somebody else, because I am trying to get the channel to over 5,000 subscribers by the end of the year. And if you can help me do that, I would really appreciate it. Thanks a lot, and I will see you next time.